You are going to die. Not eventually, not someday. You are dying right now, one breath at a time, and you have no idea how many breaths are left in the account. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, wrote that down to himself, in a tent, on the edge of a war zone, not to depress himself, but to wake himself up. Memento Mori. Remember, you will die. Most people hear that and flinch. They look away from it the way you'd look away from a wound. The Stoics heard that same sentence and went to work. Because once you actually accept that your time is a closing window, not an open-ended account you can keep drawing from forever, every excuse you've been making, every soft habit you've been protecting, every ounce of energy you've been wasting on things outside your control, it all becomes unforgivable.
You stop having the luxury of waiting until you feel ready. That is what this video is. Not 11 feel-good tips you'll nod along to and forget by tomorrow morning.
11 commands, 11 habits the old Stoics lived and died by, when survival depended on getting it right, not when survival depended on getting a like and a comment. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his private journal hoping it would trend. Epictetus didn't build his philosophy from a position of comfort. He built it as a man who had been enslaved and beaten, and still found a way to be freer in his own mind than the men who owned him. Seneca wrote some of the calmest words on death, while staring down the very real possibility that an emperor would order his. These were not lifestyle influencers. They were men who needed this philosophy to actually work, under real pressure, or they did not survive the week. So if you want soft, comfortable, motivational fluff, this is the wrong channel, and you should leave now. But if you want to actually become unshakable, sit down, shut everything else off, and listen, because I am only going to drill this into you once. Before we start, hit subscribe, not because I need the number for some algorithm, because if you walk away from this video and do nothing with it, you have proven my point for me before I even finish making it. Let's begin. Habit 1. Take command of your own mind. The Stoics had a precise word for this. The Hegemonicon, the ruling faculty, the commanding officer that sits inside your skull and decides what you do with every thought, every impulse, every hour you're given. Most people never promote themselves to that position. They live their entire lives as privates, taking orders from chaos. They let their phone command them the second they open their eyes. They let their mood command them before they've even gotten out of bed. They let a stranger's opinion, posted at 2 in the morning, command the emotional temperature of their entire day. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire, while barbarians tested his borders, while plague tore through his cities and killed members of his own household, while his own body betrayed him with illness that never fully let up, and he still found the discipline every single morning to sit down before the demands of the day arrived and write to himself about how he intended to act. Not how he felt that morning, how he intended to act regardless of how he felt. That is the entire difference between a man and a mood. A mood is weather. A man is supposed to be the mountain the weather happens to. You do not get to skip this step because you're tired, because you're busy, because you stayed up too late scrolling something that gave you nothing back. The taking of command is not optional. It is not a morning routine you perform when convenient and abandon the moment life gets inconvenient. It is the foundation everything else on this list stands on, and if the foundation is rotten, nothing built on top of it will hold. So here is the order, and it is an order, not a suggestion. Before your phone touches your hand tomorrow morning, before the noise of the day gets a single vote, you sit, you breathe, and you tell your own mind exactly what is expected of it today. Not affirmations whispered at a mirror hoping they're eventually true if you say them enough times. Orders given by the one person whose orders you actually have to obey, because there is no one else coming to run this for you. If you've never done this before, comment the word command below right now, because saying it out loud in front of strangers locks you into it in a way that thinking it privately never will, and I will be checking. Habit 2. Train the body like it's under inspection. The Stoics did not care about vanity. And if that's what you came here for, you're going to be disappointed. Marcus Aurelius wasn't worried about looking good for anyone, least of all himself. But he understood something that gets lost in a world obsessed with either ignoring the body completely or worshipping it as an end in itself. An undisciplined body breeds an undisciplined mind, and an undisciplined mind cannot be trusted to run anything, least of all your life. The Stoics called this ascesis, training, the same root word that gives us asceticism. It was never about suffering for its own sake, never about punishment. It was about proving to yourself, daily, in the smallest physical actions available to you, that you are the one in charge of this body, not your impulses, not your cravings, not the version of you that wants the easy thing right now and will deal with the consequences later. You stand up straight, not because someone is watching and judging your posture, but because slouching is what surrender looks like when it shows up in the body before it ever reaches the mind. You eat with discipline, not because you're chasing a look for other people, but because every time you say no to the easy, comfortable, immediate thing, you are reinforcing the exact same muscle that says no to everything else trying to weaken you later. Seneca lived this without apology. He ate simply by choice. He slept on hard surfaces by choice. He trained himself in deliberate discomfort so that real hardship, when it inevitably came knocking, would find him already prepared, instead of finding him soft and unpracticed. That is the entire point of this habit. You do not wait for the crisis to start building the armor. You build it now, today, in private, where no one is clapping for you, and no one will ever know unless you tell them. So tonight, before you go to sleep, find one comfort you've been leaning on too heavily, one piece of softness you've allowed to become a habit, and cut it. Not forever necessarily, just long enough to remind your body, in no uncertain terms, exactly who is in command of it. Habit 3. Control your face like you control your fate. This is not about smiling, because some article told you it releases a chemical in your brain. That is a parlor trick, dressed up as philosophy, and it has nothing to do with what the Stoics actually taught. This is about understanding that your expression is the flag flying over your camp, visible to everyone watching, and right now, for most people, that flag is permanent surrender. Every flinch, every grimace, every visibly cracked composure under pressure tells the world, and more importantly, tells your own mind, that the enemy has already gotten inside the walls. The Stoics trained themselves relentlessly to keep an even bearing under fire, not because they felt nothing, not because they were emotionless statues, but because they refused to advertise the war happening inside them to anyone who hadn't earned the right to see it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind free from passion is a citadel, and a citadel does not announce when it's under siege, it simply holds. So when the bad news lands, when the deadline collapses around you, when someone deliberately tries to provoke a reaction out of you, your face does not get a vote on how serious this is allowed to be. You decide, internally, with calculated calm, and your expression simply carries out the orders that calm has already given. This is not suppression, and it's not denial. You feel exactly what you feel, and you process it like an adult, in private, on your own time. But in the moment of actual pressure, your face stays level, because a level face keeps everyone around you level too, and chaos cannot spread through a room that refuses to broadcast it. Habit 4. Be generous with respect, ruthless with access. This is where most people get Stoicism completely wrong, and it's worth slowing down on. They think calm means weak, and they think kind means available to everyone, all the time, without limit, without condition. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery and still managed to out-discipline kings who were born into thrones, taught that you treat every human being with the basic dignity owed to a rational creature, full stop, no exceptions for how they treat you. That part is non-negotiable. But dignity and access are two entirely different currencies, and you are under no obligation whatsoever to spend the second one on people who only ever drain it. The dichotomy of control is the single most important idea in this entire philosophy, and here is exactly how it applies to the people around you. You cannot control whether someone is toxic, manipulative, draining, or simply exhausting to be near. What you can completely control is how much of your time, your energy, your attention, your one finite mind, you allow them to extract from you. So be civil to everyone, without exception. Be kind, in the sense of wishing them no harm, to everyone, without exception. And then, quietly, without drama, without a lengthy explanation, without an ounce of guilt, remove access from anyone who treats your peace like it's free for the taking. You do not owe anyone an explanation for protecting the only mind you will ever get to operate in this entire life. Habit 5. Rehearse disaster before disaster rehearses you. This is Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it is one of the most powerful and most misunderstood tools the Stoics ever built. It is not pessimism, and it is not borrowing trouble. It is reconnaissance. Seneca told his students, repeatedly and deliberately, to sit and imagine the worst realistic outcome of whatever they currently feared, not to wallow in the fear, but to walk through that outcome in advance, in cold detail, so that it lost its power to ambush them when it actually arrived. Most people are not destroyed by the disaster itself. They are destroyed by the shock of it, by the feeling that this wasn't supposed to happen to me, by being caught flat-footed at the exact moment they needed to be sharpest. Stoics refuse to be shocked, because they have already stood in the wreckage in their own mind, on their own terms, long before it ever showed up uninvited. They've already asked themselves the hard question, if this job disappears tomorrow, if this relationship ends tonight, if this body fails me next year, what exactly would I do, and how would I rebuild from there? By the time the actual storm arrives, they are not panicking in the rubble. They are executing a plan they already drafted weeks or months ago. This is precisely why Marcus Aurelius could watch his empire face plague and war simultaneously, and still write with a perfectly steady hand. He had already met his worst days, in his imagination, in private, long before they were ever real. So pick the thing you are most afraid of right now, the one you keep pushing out of your mind because looking at it feels dangerous. Spend 5 minutes tonight walking through exactly what you would do if it happened. You are not inviting it in. You are disarming it before it gets the chance to surprise you. Habit 6. Stop asking permission to set your own direction. Every single day, the world is going to hand you a script for who you should be, what you should want, how you should measure your own worth against people you've never met. Most people accept that script without question, because writing your own is harder, slower, and lonelier, and the path of least resistance is always paved with someone else's expectations. The Stoics called the rational order underlying the entire universe the logos, the structure that everything, including you, is woven into whether you acknowledge it or not. Your job is not to chase whatever the algorithm or the crowd happens to be rewarding this particular month. Your job is to find where your own actions actually align with reason and virtue, and then move in that direction with full commitment, regardless of who is watching, and regardless of who's clapping. This will cost you, and you should expect that cost rather than being surprised by it. By every account, Marcus Aurelius wanted a quieter life than the one duty handed him, a life of philosophy and study, far from the front lines of an empire. Yet he stayed at his post for decades, because that was where reason told him he genuinely belonged. Setting your own course is not about chasing comfort or chasing what feels good in the moment. It is about choosing your obligations on purpose, deliberately, instead of drifting passively into whatever obligations happen to be loudest that week. Get a piece of paper tonight, not your phone, an actual piece of paper, and write down the 3 things you genuinely value, not the 3 things you post about for an audience. Then look honestly, without flinching, at how your calendar actually gets spent, hour by hour, The gap you find between those two lists is the work in front of you. Habit 7. Plant your feet and dare them to move you. There will be a moment, and it is probably coming soon, where standing by what you actually believe is going to cost you something real. A relationship, a reputation, the comfortable approval of a room full of people whose opinion you've been quietly chasing for years. Most people fold completely in that exact moment, and afterward they tell themselves it was wisdom, when in reality, it was simple fear, wearing a calmer, more respectable name. Epictetus said it without softening a single word of it. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Read that again, slowly, because it deserves a second pass. The man is telling you directly that growth requires you to survive being misunderstood, possibly for a long time, possibly by people whose approval you actually wanted. Marcus Aurelius did not write his private journal to be quoted centuries later by motivational channels. He wrote it because he needed to remind himself, daily, under real pressure, who he actually was, in a world constantly trying to negotiate him down into someone smaller and easier to manage. You do not have to fight every single battle that presents itself to you. Pick the ground that actually matters, the hill you're genuinely willing to die on, and on that ground specifically, you do not move, you do not apologize for occupying it, and you do not require the room's permission to hold it. Habit 8. Keep a blade of dark humor sheathed at your side. This is not about being funny for an audience. It is about refusing to let your own suffering become sacred and untouchable to you. Seneca wrote that the man who can laugh at himself will never run out of material, and he meant it as armor, not as entertainment. The moment you start taking your own ego too seriously, every insult becomes a wound that festers, and every setback becomes a tragedy worthy of mourning. The Stoics deliberately weaponized a grim, dry, unsentimental kind of humor, specifically to strip the power out of things that were actively trying to destroy them emotionally. You miss the promotion you wanted, and instead of collapsing into despair, you find the absurd edge of it. You get publicly embarrassed in front of people whose opinion you care about, and you find the angle that makes it survivable, maybe even slightly amusing in hindsight. This is not denial of the problem. The problem remains exactly as real as it was. What changes is your relationship to it, the moment you refuse to treat your own pain as the single most important event in human history. Humor, used this specific way, is not weakness. It is a blade most people around you don't even know you're carrying, and you should keep it that way. Habit 9. Respect is owed to everyone. Reverence is earned by almost no one. You treat every person you encounter, regardless of their status, their opinions, or how they behave toward you, as a rational being worthy of basic dignity. That part of the equation is not up for debate, and it never will be. But there is a second tier that most people accidentally collapse into the first, and it is costing them everything. Reverence, deference, the quiet bending of your own standards purely to keep someone else comfortable. You do not owe that to anyone, ever, regardless of their title or their volume or their persistence. The Stoics drew a hard, deliberate line between courtesy and submission, and most people never learn where that line actually sits. You can disagree with someone completely, hold your own ground entirely, refuse every single one of their demands, and still extend basic, even-handed respect, because the respect was never about whether they happened to be right. It was always about what kind of person you have already decided to be, regardless of who you happen to be dealing with that day. Comment the word respect below if you understand the actual difference between being kind and being controlled, because most people genuinely never learn it, and it costs them every relationship they're in. Habit 10. Set the parameter, then enforce it like gravity. A boundary you do not enforce isn't a boundary at all. It's a suggestion, and the world treats suggestions exactly like invitations to keep pushing. The dichotomy of control applies here just as sharply as everywhere else. You cannot control whether people test your limits, and they will, repeatedly, often without even realizing they're doing it. What you absolutely control is whether those limits actually hold when tested. Most people announce a boundary exactly once, feel the brief discomfort of someone pushing back against it, and quietly retreat without a word, training everyone around them, permanently, that their stated word is negotiable if you just push hard enough. Do not become that person. State the limit once, clearly, without an extended justification attached to it, because justifying it invites debate, and the debate is precisely how it gets worn down over time. Then hold it the exact way gravity holds you to the ground, without visible effort, without performed emotion, simply because that is now how things operate around you. People will test it exactly as many times as it takes them to learn, definitively, that you mean it. Your job is to make that number as small as humanly possible. Habit 11. Cut what doesn't survive contact with death. This is where Memento Mori earns its place as the final, brutal filter for everything else on this entire list. When you genuinely sit with the fact that your time is finite and actively closing, not theoretically someday, but actually right now, an enormous amount of what currently occupies your mind simply cannot survive that test. The grudge you've been carrying around for months, does it matter on your last day? The relationship that drains you completely and gives nothing back in return, does it deserve a single additional hour of the time you have remaining? The negative voice running constant commentary in your own head about your inadequacy. Would you let a stranger speak to you that way out loud? And if the answer is no, why exactly are you letting yourself? This is amor fati in its sharpest, least comfortable form. The love of fate, not as passive resignation, not as giving up, but as the active, deliberate decision to stop wasting your strictly limited allotment on anything that genuinely isn't worthy of it. Marcus Aurelius kept death close to him constantly, not to despair over it, but to discipline himself into permanent urgency. You do not have unlimited time to fix what's broken in your life. You have today, and maybe tomorrow if you're fortunate, and that is the exact deal every single person alive has been given. Stop negotiating with it, as though more time is coming. 11 habits. Not 11 gentle suggestions you can get to eventually. 11 standing orders, the same ones men carried with them onto actual battlefields and into actual plagues, and through the collapse of everything they had once assumed was permanent, and came out the other side, still standing, still in command of their own mind, still in full control of what they could control, and genuinely unbothered by everything they couldn't. You do not need motivation. Motivation is for people who are still waiting to feel like it before they act. You need discipline, because discipline does not wait around for permission from your mood, your energy level, or your circumstances. If even one of these 11 hit something true in you while you were watching, comment the word discipline below right now, and then close this app and go enforce one of these 11 habits before today is over. Not tomorrow. Today. Memento Mori. The clock is running whether you act or not. Get to work.